Alright, so we've got some interesting news from the tip of the dark continent that is South Africa. Let's get into it.
So Sakeliga just basically declared war on the ANC and on their race-based policies. Now, I'm recording this on a Sunday, and I'm not yet sure if I'm going to make this early access for members, because this is quite breaking news, and so I'll probably just make this live immediately. But if I don't, normal viewers, you will be seeing it on Monday morning. Members, you'll be seeing it on Sunday, so I apologize for interrupting the last day of your weekend, but this is massive. So those of you that remember, about a week ago during my live stream, I told you about Lex Libertas and the plans that Lex Libertas had shared with America about what they could be doing in order to help the Afrikaner here in South Africa. And one of the big things that they announced there was a way for the Americans to get around BEE and offer incentive to South African companies that don't want to adhere to BEE, that don't want to buy into
which is a fantastic
transformative redressing race laws and punitive, vengeful racism of the ANC. Now, I will tell you what it is, because it turns out that Sakeliga has been in a similar thing, and they're now talking about their perspective and what they're going to be planning as well. So in this video, I am going to cover quite a bit of ground. I'm going to explain to you what the proposals are, so that you guys know that. Then I'm going to explain to you what the South African government could do in response to this, because it's not like the South African government doesn't have some, tools in their shed. And then I'm going to explain to you what this is most likely going to lead to, and that is the thing that's really scary, and I think the part that you guys really want to talk about. So stick around for that. All right, so let's just quickly talk. What is Sakeliga's plan? So first, the Americans have been looking for a replacement to AGOA. They've not been happy with how AGOA works, and in Sakeliga's own words, the biggest problem is that AGOA is an incredibly blunt instrument. Right now, the way it works is if a central government in Africa adheres to the requirements and demands of the American government, that country and all companies in that country gains access to the American market tariff-free, or without any import taxes of any kind. Not that the Americans have import taxes, but you get what I'm saying. Now, for the Americans, this is a bit of a problem, because AGOA was never meant to help countries in Africa. It was meant to help the African people. And so you will get companies that are perfectly in agreement and in alignment with the Americans' demands, but yet their government is out of whack, and therefore that company gets punished as well.
But this is the thing always with like these international organizations that get set up to help the plight of the poor, underprivileged black people, and not just black people, but just the poor, underprivileged mentality. We have to understand that, unfortunately, with the poor mentality that is in PvP server countries, and I suppose the continent of Africa as a whole, you've continually got these organizations that would seek to obviously benefit the people of these communist regimes, these backwards thinking PvP server countries, by helping them out with business opportunities, by helping them out with aid, by helping them out with all sorts of humanitarian ventures to make people's lives better. The problem is, most of the time, in fact 90% of the time, in fact I don't really know an instance where it's actually worked, where this aid comes into the countries, and because they've got a backwards mindset, specifically the people in leadership, they end up stealing the money. They will claim that it's, oh yes, we're going to use it for the people. We're going to benefit the people by doing all these things. Yes, please, won't you help us out? We desperately need help. And the magnanimity of the Western civilization, white European countries, for instance, they love the idea of, oh, that's going to be great. Let us help. We've got this bend toward compassion and generosity. and wanting to help out, because it's the right thing to do, and it is the right thing to do. Unfortunately, because of suicidal empathy, the West has, I think they're starting to realize it now, but the West for a very long time has been pumping billions of dollars into African countries, and the countries haven't gotten better. So, where's all the money going? Well, if it's not going to the people, the countries aren't getting better. In fact, they're getting worse. You can only deduce that the money must be getting stolen. The grand schemes, the magnanimity, the compassion, the generosity, all of that is being taken advantage of by these governments. But I digress. I think people are slowly starting to wake up to it, and I think it's a fantastic thing.
And so Sakeliga went to the Americans and offered them or proposed to them a new type of agreement. Now, there's two parts to this. The first is the sub-national AGOA agreement, and then there's the sub-region AGOA agreement. The sub-region one is the scary one. We'll talk about that in a second. But okay, so what you need to understand is what they're proposing is that instead of making a deal with the government of Africa, so like South Africa, and we'll use South Africa here as the example, but this will apply to all countries in sub-Saharan Africa that is part of the AGOA agreement at the moment. So let's say the South African government, the ANC, is not meeting the demands of the Americans, and there are 5, you guys know them by now, so we won't go through them again, but the headlines: expropriation without compensation, singing the kill the bird, kill the farmer, BEE, and transformation laws, or what the Americans like to call DEI laws.
Affirmative action kind of
if
stuff.
If a country doesn't like our country can't be part of the AGOA agreement. AGOA is going away on the 31st of December of this year anyways.
That's a good thing.
So a new proposal needs to be reached and a new agreement needs to be reached, and this is the one that they put forward. So they say if a company in South Africa doesn't do BE, so it isn't part of the BE agreements, it doesn't do transformation, so it hires based purely on merit, not based on race, and the company isn't singing kill the poor, kill the farmer, and the company isn't expropriating without compensation, not really those, but you get what I'm saying. If that company is adhering to the demands of the American government, then that company gains access to the American markets without paying tariffs, and the country may still be under tariffs. The country could even be under sanction.
So basically what it sounds like to me is going to happen is you as a company, you as a person that wants to start a company or is currently in operation now, you're going to have options to... This is really good in the sense of to see where your allegiances lie. So you've now got the option as a person who owns a company to be like, okay, well, I'm tired of BEE and I want to get done away with BEE. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to go ahead and sign up to this new proposal in order to potentially do business with America and not be penalized by the government. But then I wonder how it's going to work, because the government's obviously going to be up in arms about that, the South African government, because obviously you're going to be seen as a traitor if you do these kinds of things. But it's fantastic in terms of it's the right thing to do, because I think it's preposterous, BE and affirmative action and DEI and all that kind of crazy stuff. So you basically, what this boils down to is you've now got an option. You don't necessarily have to be continually pandering to the government, pandering to these ridiculous laws and restrictions on your business. There's now an option for you, which is a good thing, and it opens up the market, the US market, to you, which is a lot better than the South African one.
But that company would be free to trade with the Americans. And then we get to the sub-region AGOA agreement that they've also proposed, and in South Africa's case, this would be basically the Western Cape. The Western Cape could now decide look, America, we're not going to enforce BE. We're not going to enforce transformation laws. We're not going to enforce expropriation without compensation. We will not allow the singing of kill the poor, kill the farmer in our province. And as a result of that, the Americans can then grant the Western Cape access to the American markets.
So in a sense, this is also going to help the idea of the Cape independence. I know that there's that movement, the Cape independence, where they're striving for self-determination. As far as I understand, I think Freedom Front Plus is part of that. They're trying to be a part of that. They're a part of it, something like that. So if this comes to fruition, this is going to be a very good idea in a sense of also trying to get or helping the case for Cape independence and some kind of establishment of a self-determination, obviously specifically for white South Africans, considering we're not very much liked here in South Africa. Obviously, there's going to be the continual trope of, oh no, that's not true, that's not true. The data says otherwise, but that does potentially seem like a good idea. Of course, there's going to be a lot of resistance regarding this, and I suppose in a sense rightfully so. If you live in a communist regime and you're attempting to break out from under the boot of your oppressors, I suppose in a weird way I could agree with them in the sense that, well, sure, of course, you would be considered a traitor. How dare you want to come out from under the boot of us? How dare you want to have self-determination? How dare you want to not be oppressed by us anymore? So I suppose in that sense, you can kind of see how you wanting to side with the Americans, because look, at the end of the day, there's going to have to come to, you have to choose a side. I think the days of this whole, oh no, it's always good to be a centrist. I'm neither, for the left or for the right. To bring it into like the American context, I'm neither for Democrats or for conservatives. I like to see myself as a centrist. I don't go to extremes. I think those days are long gone, especially in this day and age. And there should have never really been a middle ground regarding political opinions, and the whole idea of being unbiased is, I think everybody's seen in the advent of COVID that the news is so corrupt, mainstream media is so corrupt, they lie and they gaslight and they do all sorts of things to make it out like we're the uninformed agitators and we need to just sit down and let the experts handle the business. Well, we've seen time and time again how the experts have completely failed, completely hoodwinked us, completely taken us for a ride, taken advantage, and we've been left none the better for it. So I can completely see from the ANC's perspective, from the communist ideology, how this would potentially lead to, some fireworks.
Even though the rest of South Africa is not granted that access. So that is, in a nutshell, what Sakaliga has proposed to the Americans, and based on insider sources, at least from Lex Libertas' side, as well as some other people that I've heard speaking about this, the Americans seem very keen on this, because all throughout Africa, it would open the door for a lot of companies that are perfectly above board to be able to access the American markets, and it would also give the American government a lot more freedom to employ tools like sanctions and like tariffs on South African companies without necessarily punishing good and decent people in those countries.
That's right.
So what exactly could the South African government do in this regard? Now, first, on the BEE side of things and the transformation laws, BEE at the moment, as it exists in South Africa, is quite literally just the ability to do business with the state. And since most of the business that is done in South Africa is done with the state, because our state is so large, most large companies need to adhere to BEE so that they can gain access to state contracts and the like. This is the ability for companies to say, well, actually, I am willing to forego my contracts with the state and instead just gain access to the American market. I'll make more money exporting my goods to America than what the state can ever pay me.
100%.
And since the state is notorious for bad payment, I will get my money guaranteed in the Americas. And so I'm just going to export there.
I mean, I think just, if you're a business owner, I think this is a 100% golden opportunity. I think this makes just complete logical sense. Why would you not? First of all, it's kind of like a dual wielding proposition, because first of all, you're sticking it to the ANC. You're saying, screw you, we can go ahead and... So you've got that, you're sticking it to the ANC, and then also you're getting access to the American market, which is far, far bigger than the South African market. I mean, tenfold at least, I would imagine. Got to be more. So you're showing yourself to be a patriot, first of all, and then you're going to be able to make a hell of a lot more money. It seems like a no-brainer, really. Of course, that's if you have a spine, which is another thing, I suppose.
And I'm not even going to worry about this. And since American companies are basically the largest shipping companies in the world, the American shipping companies will sign the contracts with these companies, and these companies will be able to ship using American shipping companies. So all of that, cool. So the South African government, the ANC, would have to redress the laws. They would have to change the laws to employ punitive measures. This means punish a company that does not adhere to its race-based laws, and this would be a direct punishment. So this is not just the exclusionary punishment, which is already against international law. Now the government would have to write into their law that they can fine a company that isn't BEE compliant up to 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, 50,000 rand a day if that company isn't compliant. This would put the South African government even more against international law, and that would then just completely expose the ANC.
Because that would,
for the terrorists.
I mean, that would absolutely 100% oppress. That would go to show. In fact, they would expose themselves so spectacularly if this works, because obviously they would automatically crash out. They would go double down. They would go impose stricter regulations. They would penalize via money, via all sorts of measures, these companies that decide to, opt for the American trading system. Yeah, I'm just thinking that would be absolutely hilarious, because the ANC would expose themselves so much, and it would show the international community that, oh, so all those crazy white people, all those people that were talking about the farm murders, all those people that were talking about the oppression of white people, the oppression of minorities as well, let's be fair, all those people that were crashing out for so long about all those things, it now does seem like they're onto something. All the naysayers who didn't believe us to begin with, it really does seem like they're onto something, because it's interesting that all the companies that have opted for this new agreement between America and companies, let's call it, for the sake of keeping it simple, the Western Cape companies that decide to go along with this proposal, it does seem like all these companies in the Western Cape that are going ahead with this proposal, they do seem to sure be getting a hell of a lot of stick from the ANC, from the South African government, and they do seem to be getting penalized a hell of a lot. And that kind of just goes to show that maybe that oppression stuff, maybe they were onto something to begin with. And of course the ANC's gonna do what they always do. They'll make excuses. They'll probably use the terms something to the effect of, oh, but these companies, they're in rebellion. They're not abiding by the sovereignty of the country. They're traitors. They're racists. They'll probably use the typical tropes, I would imagine. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Next up is employment equity. That's going to be a much larger cookie to crack, because under employment equity, it's already punitive. If you don't adhere to the minister's archaic rules, you can be fined up to 10,000 Rand a day. And so this is going to be something that's going to be immediately challenged in international court. And there's going to have to be some figuring out there. Let's talk about the real scary one, and that is the sub.
And I'm thinking it's also going to be interesting regarding the international court, should this get even taken to the international court. It's also going to be interesting to see how the international court, should this hypothetically work out and America does do this whole proposal thing and it does start working and ANC does start penalizing companies in the Western Cape. It is going to be interesting how the international court decides to handle this. The international court, from what I've seen, doesn't necessarily seem to be too concerned about the plight of one specific race. We don't need to mention that. Which race it is, we obviously know. But it would be interesting to see, how fair and quote-unquote unbiased they are when a situation like this happens, where the white people are the ones that are being oppressed and they're seeking justice. It would be interesting to see what happens in that regard.
Region part. So the Western Cape. And the Western Cape can declare that they're not going to adhere to the government stuff. They're going to allow companies in their province to be exporting to America. Well, that's the scary part, because this puts the Western Cape, the first ever province in South Africa, in direct odds with national government. Now, national government controls.
Again, yes, it's true. But we must also remember that in the apartheid days, the bad apartheid days, South Africa's military was top tier, S-class. We had all the gadgets, we had all the toys, our technological advancement was through the roof. We were doing crazy stuff. We've still got that. We've still got that spark, that ingenuity, that creativity, within us. If we're choosing sides now and choosing to go with America, I mean, what on earth would be stopping us from making military deals with America to be like, well, seeing as how we've put all our eggs in one basket, the American market, and we've definitely chosen allegiance, what on earth would be stopping us from saying, well, can you guys please help us out with a couple of troops? Can you please help us out with some tech so we can deal with the impending possible war that would happen, considering that, we're seen as traitors from the ANC. Because how dare you want to get out from the oppressive boot of the communists? Yeah, I'm thinking that would be, just give Elon Musk a phone call. Give some of the other people phone calls. Seeing as how we're doing business on the American market, we've chosen a side. We can definitely make something work, 100%. We'll be able to defend ourselves, one way or another.
The budgets of our country, so every single dollar or rand that you and I pay in taxes, go to Pretoria, and then Pretoria gives that money or some of that money back to the provinces. This means that Pretoria can punitively punish a province and say, well, since you're not employing the rule of the land, we're not going to give you your budget. This would immediately mean that the Western Cape would have to effectively declare secession. But
I mean,
the
it's
Western
great.
Cape...
It is great. In fact, if you think about it, it is in a sense, we've chosen to, by siding with the Americans, we fundamentally chosen a forced self-determination. Instead of attempting to seek diplomacy, seek diplomatic channels in order to somehow get self-determination, which of course, why on earth would the ANC be so stupid that they would give us self-determination? This whole idea of somehow one day the ANC is going to come to the conclusion that, you know what, these white people, they really deserve this self-determination. Let's go ahead and let's give them a chunk of land so that they can do what they want to do, and they can invite minorities, and they can invite like-minded people, and they can just go ahead and let's see what they can come up with. And in terms of, let's see if they can make that little spit of land that we give them thrive and prosper. Why the hell would they actually do that? There is no logical scenario that the communist oppressors would ever give self-determination to the white people and the minorities. And again, I would go ahead so far as to say it's not necessarily about race, it's about a mindset. Why would they give that to the white people? Or shall I say, to the Western mindset people? There is no way in hell they would do that, because they know that it's going to work. It's going to work, it's going to prosper, it's going to flourish, they're going to get mogged heavy. So it actually makes no sense that they would do that. So this way around is really, it is us really putting all our eggs in the basket and saying, we're choosing to rebel. We're choosing to side with America. We're choosing to rebel against South Africa, against the communist mindset. And yeah, I can see that going fantastically, and also opens up a lot of avenues for risky business, which is great. It's about time. We have to, because there is no other option, because they'll never give us self-determination. So it's kind of almost like we have to take it by force. And this is a kind of like a very soft kind of force, more like an economic force as opposed to a violent kind of force, which is smart. I think makes good common sense.
Can declare secession now because the Western Cape has an active trading partner, insofar as all of their farmers and companies that are currently producing things for the rest of South Africa, since they can't gain access to South Africa anymore, they can now declare, can now just export those goods to America instead and offset the sort of loss in that way. That sort of immediately means secession in South Africa, with the South African government then having to decide, are we willing to go to war in order to keep the Western Cape from, not being racist? Or are we just going to relax our own laws? The part that scares me there is, if you had a sensible government in charge, that sensible government would immediately go, okay, this is bad news for us. We need to go look at our own rules and we need to figure out how to change them. No, but we don't have a sensible government in charge here.
No, we
don't. And so it's very possible that the ANC sees this as a challenge to their sovereignty.
Of course they would. Of course they would.
They decide to act violently.
They're going to crash
out. The military or sitting in the police and trying
the military.
to basically overthrow the Western Cape government, declaring the DA as traitors or as enemies of the state. And so, that sets off a whole host of issues. But fundamentally, this would be the first step towards either Cape independence or towards just a natural federalization in Africa, because there are a lot of regions in Africa that will probably follow suit. with provinces just sort of breaking off and going with America, saying we don't want to follow this national government anymore.
I mean, can you just imagine if it actually works? Like, you've got this shining beacon in 10 years' time that is the Western Cape, where we've got all the technological advancements that America does. We've been trading with them for like a decade. We look fantastic. The province of the Western Cape is actually working, and it's actually brilliant, and it looks like a first world city, first world province. And then you've got, you know, the hellscape that is the rest of South Africa, because all the talent has obviously moved down to the Western Cape, and all the sane people have moved to the Western Cape, and the rest of South Africa is just like a commie hellscape. I mean, of course, the ANC would be crashing out. You know, there is no scenario where in the mind of the ANC, in the mind of the commies, it's like, maybe we should take a step back and attempt to learn what they're doing. No. Their mind is, it's because we're black. It's because they're white. It's because, I don't know, racist stuff. It's because we've been disadvantaged. It's because of apartheid. Of course they'll crash out.
You might just get this natural balkanization that happens as a result of this. The law itself seems incredibly dangerous, even though I do agree with it. I think that's exactly what we need here in this country, basically anything to kick the ANC in the teeth. But Agreed. It does come with severe legal challenges and severe sort of, I guess you could say, safety challenges that we will have to think about. Because what does it look like when a province in South Africa just says...
But man, people are tired, man.
Sorry, no. We're not going to employ all of these. For us, it makes financially more sense to just tax our companies directly on the exports that they make tariff-free to America. We're going to do that instead. What does that look like? I don't think any of us actually know. And I personally think this is going to get Sakaliga into some scuffles, let's say, with the ANC.
That's inevitable.
I'll keep you guys abreast of everything that is going to happen as it's going to play out. There's a lot more that was announced, but this was sort of the big chunk that I wanted to share with all of you. And you can go watch the interview, this one here, over on Biz News to hear exactly what Sakaliga is in the process of doing and how they're in the process of working this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you found any value in the content that I make, please consider it.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Shout out to Stefan Zere. You can follow him on YouTube. But yeah, that's exciting news. I mean, yeah, it's very possible that the ANC will crash out. In fact, 100% the ANC will crash out. There is no world where the ANC doesn't crash out. This is definitely going to be a thorn in their side. But yeah, I mean, you know what, in terms of safety risks, in terms of all this kind of stuff, you know what, I think most of the people here in South Africa, we're just tired of the stagnation. We're tired of this downward spiral. We're tired of this whole mentality about you can see no hope, no future, no idea of anything ever getting better. You know that voting is fundamentally pointless because the based logical parties, I mean, I think at best is probably the Freedom Front Plus at this point. That's probably the only one that's kind of got some kind of brains on their shoulders. But as for the rest, they've all got just some form or another of communism baked into the ideology. So, and you know that the Freedom Front Plus is fundamentally never going to win. They're too small. The majority, once again, this is why fundamentally democracy is stupid. But the majority, they'll never win the majority vote. Freedom Front Plus, they'll never win it. So, and the whole idea of self-determination in terms of having it get passed by diplomatic channels will never happen, because why the hell would the ANC give up the golden goose? which is, you know, fundamentally the white taxpayers. So yeah, I think this is kind of the only option that we have, you know, a rebellion, so to speak. And of course everybody gets triggered and very scared when it comes to the talk of rebellion. But I suppose this is the most less violent option in terms of rebellion. So I think, yeah, this could fundamentally be our best option here in South Africa. But yeah, that's pretty much all from me. I'll check you guys on the next one, folks. Cheers.